Hey everybody, two Alpha Gals here. I'm Debbie Nichols.
And I'm Candace Mathis, and you're listening to In the Tall Grass, where we're sharing stories of reinvention, resilience, and rediscovering joy.
Whether it's facing Alpha Gal syndrome or any other redefining chapter of life, we all have to learn how to navigate the journey through the tall grass. So here we go.
So over the years, we have both made mental health a huge priority in our self-care routine. One of the aspects that we have found to be most beneficial is shifting our mindset in the use of language. How we perceive ourselves and the world around us either positively or negatively impacts our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, we've really seen how mindset and internal dialogue have had a big effect on how we feel. So, for example, when Candace and I speak, we like to say that we've spent the last 15 years or so not so much suffering from our allergies, but instead overcoming them. Yes, Alpha Gal was the catalyst for starting two Alpha Gals. It impacts, so many of the choices we make every day, but we don't like to think that it defines us. So today, we're interviewing Tamara Hubbard, family therapist and founder and CEO of the Food Allergy Counselor. Hi, Tamara.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. It's one of my favorites.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your knowledge with us. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing in the food allergy space?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm a family therapist. So I actually have my own private practice, but separate of that, I founded and I'm the CEO of the Food Allergy Counselor, which is an allergy psychosocial resource hub. So while a lot of the content on there is food allergy specific, it's actually all the concepts are really applicable to all allergic diseases and anything that's life impacting, any kind of diagnosis that's life impacting. So but yeah, I love as a therapist talking about mindset and language as a tool. So when you guys asked me to talk about this, I was like so excited.
Well, that's very exciting for us to hear too, because we know that you are very familiar with this topic and it's good to get a professional's opinion on it. So diving right in, language perception is a funny thing. And I guess I've always thought about it, but not so much as until I had kids. Like, for example, when my kids were little, they refused to eat fish sticks. But if I called them fish nuggets, they had no problem with them. So what do you see as the significance of language perception when navigating a food allergy?
Yeah, so language is actually a tool. The theory that I practice with my own patients and clients, and that I incorporate into a lot of the webinars and content that I put out there, is called acceptance and commitment therapy. And one part of that is what's called relational frame theory. So relational frame theory is sort of one of the parts. If you think about it like a car engine, it's kind of like part of the engine that helps the car run and act. Acceptance and commitment therapy is the car. So relational frame theory really is all about how we use language as a tool to categorize things. So we categorize things in our world, we categorize experiences, we use language to label things. Oftentimes we might label things good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. So it's not always, when we use language as a tool, it's not always helpful, but it can be helpful. And language also impacts our mindset, which we know our mindset actually impacts our thoughts, feelings, and our actions. So how we say what we say matters so much. I think you guys touched on that, right? I loved how you guys said, we're not suffering, but we're overcoming things. And that right there has a complete impact on your mindset and then what actions you're going to take going forward.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think it is once you realize the impact of that, I think it shifts. You just continue to make those smaller mindset adjustments.
Yeah. Well, and how we perceive things. Again, there was actually a study done at Stanford, and it was they had an OIT study, an oral immunotherapy study going on, and they wanted to look at the mindset. If they changed the language, that would change people's perceptions, and would that change how they felt about being in the study and the responses they were having from oral immunotherapy? So, for instance, and I don't remember the exact wording, but one group would basically just be told, okay, that scratchy throat is just a symptom of what happens when we do oral immunotherapy. And then another group was told, oh, that's a sign that your body is doing its job. That's a sign that your body's recognizing something is happening, and it's good. So which group do you think was a little bit more accepting of the scratchy throat or the symptoms? Obviously the one that had it framed that way. So that's that whole framing piece, right? We use language to frame things up. We use language to make a relation between things, and we use language to perceive different situations. So if we label reactions, allergic reactions as severe or not severe, or if we, put a label on it that it's good to go to that place and it's safe to go to that place and not safe to go to that place, we're immediately assigning categories. We're immediately assigning perception. And so therefore, when we're faced with that similar situation going forward, we're going to go, oh yeah, that's not good, or that's not safe, and that's safe, right? We have to be careful what language we use, because it does have such an impact, not only on how we feel, but how our kids feel, or how our family feels about allergies, or how our community feels about allergies.
That is so fascinating to me. And something came to mind when you were talking. So back when I was doing all my intense workouts, I'm not doing them so much now, would like to start again at some point, but we'll get there. But back when I was doing them, one of my favorite videos that I would watch, the instructor always said, pain is fear leaving the body. And so I always wondered why that forced me to do 5 more push-ups or pull-ups or whatever. But it was immediately motivating to me when I'm thinking, I can't do another crunch, but it makes a lot of sense based on what you're saying right there.
Well, it changed the function of what pain was, right? So just by the way that instructor said it, you now were able to associate pain with something good, with a benefit, rather than it being a cost, which was something awful, right? None of us like to be uncomfortable or feel uncomfortable. So if somebody can pair something that's uncomfortable with something that's beneficial, then we're able to see it that way. And now our motivation and our actions change too.
Yes, absolutely. That is really cool.
I know. Language, literally, language as an intervention. I'm holding up a book and you guys can't see it who are listening, but this relational frame theory book that I have it says language as intervention. So as a therapist, language, how we talk about things, is an actual clinical tool. And so language as humans out there, just having conversations, can be a catalyst or a tool as well.
Yeah. And it's pretty incredible, because I'm going to be really vulnerable right this minute. I've been feeling a little weird, as we're talking, and I've had to revert back to okay, that ping in my head does not mean that I'm going to fall out of the chair right now, and it was something that really came forward for me in EMDR therapy, that a friend had, shared with me her own personal healing journey through EMDR. And when I was super acute and dealing with motion sickness almost daily and trying to get to the bottom of why that was happening, I decided to go into EMDR therapy, and I did it for a year, and that was transformative for me. And it's like my body wants to fall back into the panic mode of, this is wrong, this is unsafe, oh my gosh. But I've learned to lean in and note the feeling, name it, sit with it. And I literally was just doing that while you two were talking. I'm not going to lie.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, these are tools that we can use without people knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just brings this, when you experience that you're grounded, you're not gonna fall out or go to that unsafe place.
Yeah.
Then it helps you take the next step forward. And so I would love to know a little bit more about what is the relationship between perception and maybe that leaning in to the feelings. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
So what you're talking about, I mean, let's be honest, as humans, our mind is a complex place. As humans, we can easily overcomplicate things. We add in our thoughts, we add in our feelings, past experiences, assumptions, right? Language that's not useful, all of that together. And we can certainly get ourselves to a place of overthinking. Of course, then overthinking tends to lead us to rigid perceptions. So those tend to lead to cognitive distortions. Something is always this way or never this way. We have some amazing power over other people, which we can assert to control everything, right? Which actually isn't true. Or the other way around, the fallacy that what we're doing has the ability to ruin everybody's life, right? And so now we feel bad about that. So our complex minds as humans leads us to overthink automatically. I mean, that's typically what happens is we're overthinking instead of what you just did, which was observe, right? So instead of thinking, which is what we automatically want to do, which complicates things and usually makes us feel worse, leaning into the feeling and saying, and this is where language comes in, right? There's a difference between saying, I notice that I'm feeling, insert feeling. I notice that I'm feeling uncomfortable. I notice that I'm feeling anxious versus saying I'm anxious. Instead of assigning a feeling to yourself, or instead of saying I am this feeling, which feels like you don't have a whole lot of ability to influence an outcome or change the direction, by just changing the language to say I am feeling, or I notice I'm feeling, or I notice I'm thinking, even if you don't fill the rest of it in, I notice I'm thinking. I notice I'm feeling. You're allowing space for choice. What do I want to do with that? What's the next action I want to take? What's that in service of? Is it in service of quieting my anxiety, or is it in service of calming myself, right? So that's exactly what you've just talked about, was a perfect way of saying it, right? It's just sitting and observing. We don't have to judge. See, there's the thinking. Why am I feeling that way? Why can't I stop feeling that way? Now you're judging yourself, right? Or I now need to just delete that thought. Good luck. We can't, there's no delete button in our mind. So now you're eliminating or decreasing the struggle that you're feeling. That's an additional struggle on top of just feeling the way you're feeling. And so by changing the language and saying, I notice that I'm feeling, or I notice that I'm thinking, you're giving yourself space to make a choice that maybe more aligns with what you want the outcome to be and what your values tell you to do.
That's actually really powerful.
Yeah.
If you think about it, in just reading, and you really hear it everywhere, this power of mantras and affirmations and, manifesting, know, and so you hear about this everywhere and how it can change outcomes. So, using phrases like I am feeling and I notice I'm thinking, changing the language seems like a great place to start. How else do you encourage your clients to shift their perception?
Yeah. So patients or clients typically come to therapy or reach out to therapists with emotional goals, right? So it's typically something along the lines of, I want to feel less of a feeling that I feel uncomfortable about, so anxiety, and I want to feel more of something I enjoy, like joy or contentment or happiness, right? So that's an emotional goal. What's useful, and this is good for, work as a therapist with your clients or just for everybody else to think about, is to change that emotional goal into a behavioral goal. So shifting that from what do you want to do more or less of? How do you want to show up in that kind of a situation differently than you're showing up right now? Then that helps them work towards achieving something that is a shift, right? What tends to happen is when we sit and say things like, I want to feel less anxious, or I hate feeling anxious, again, an emotional goal, we can easily shift into what's called wishful thinking. I wish it wasn't this way. Gosh, I wish that my husband would X, Y, and Z, or my spouse or my partner would do this, right? That tends to just keep us in sort of this cycle. I'm a big metaphor person. So the metaphor that I think of when I think about being stuck in a wishful thinking cycle is National Lampoon's European Vacation, where he's going around the roundabout going, look, it's Big Ben, Parliament, right? We just keep going around and nothing changes. We don't get off and see any other sites in London, right? So by changing our thoughts and saying, okay, great, I noticed that I really I'm embracing the fact that this sucks. I don't like the way that I feel. Now, what do I want to do about it? How do I want to change how I'm showing up? And when I use the language of how do you want to show up in that moment, anxiety and fear tends to make us want to do certain things that may not actually be in service of growth, that may not be in service of us becoming empowered. So it may push us towards avoiding things that make us feel uncomfortable and scared, but then we tend to stay stuck and we tend to not do meaningful things in life because of that. So we have to lean in, like you said before, lean into that feeling and say, what is it that I want to be doing more of? How do I want to show up? Maybe I want to show up as brave in that moment. Maybe that's an important value in my life. And so that's another thing. 3 guides that can help us make that shift are: what are your values? What's important to you in life? What's meaningful? And what are you not doing because of fear and anxiety? How are you not aligning with those values? Another tool is, again, like I said, where is it that you want to be? What do you want your life to look like? And what's holding you back from that? And so now let's work towards steps to help you do that hard thing, but meaningful thing. And then, of course, language is a tool that you can use to get to all of these places.
Yeah. And I know, like, for me, for example, I started to think about when I was dealing with motion sickness and pretty extreme anxiety with, am I going to have a reaction when I'm driving? You know, it was like all of these past experiences with anaphylaxis, they really paralyzed me in a lot of ways. I didn't like being alone. I was terrified to drive.
Yeah.
And I came up with my own through therapy, but then also, which I don't know if this was a positive or negative thing. For me, I feel like it was positive because it helped me have this like roadmap to taking a step. I would literally, if I had to go pick my daughter up from school, for example, I would map out in my mind, okay, I know someone at this point, my husband's office is at this point, and I would take my trips like broken down in that way. And it helped me take the step to say, okay, I made it home and I didn't fall out.
Yeah. What you're talking about, and I think, I mean, again, see, you even tried to categorize that on the onset of sharing that story as, I don't know if this was good or bad, or, you know, whatever, right? So here we are with language trying to categorize it.
Right.
If I step back and observe as someone outside of this situation, right, you were trying to make it workable. At the end of the day, you're trying to make it workable. And you found small successes, small little benchmarks to help you empower yourself to do something that felt incredibly hard. So that's workable. And that's really, I mean, again, that's not a judgmental phrase. So even just using the word, is that workable for me? Does that work for me? Does that help me, you know, achieve a goal? Another set of language, or another couple of words I would say that would be helpful in those kinds of situations where we feel like anxiety and fear are maybe holding us back or paralyzing us, is the use of the word yet, right? I'm not feeling brave enough to do that yet, but I'm working on that. Or I'm not there yet, but I'm working towards it, right? Or the word and. A lot of times we get into an or mindset. It's either this or that. We can have two what seem like completely opposite feelings or opposite thoughts at the same time. When I was at the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology conference, we just call it the college because there's a lot of words there. I was at the college conference last week. Everyone kept saying, well, you know, how was it? My husband would check in. How was it? Well, it was energizing and exhausting, right? So it wasn't energizing or exhausting. It was both. And those are, you know, kind of not very compatible things. I was energized, but also exhausted at the same time. And then there's the phrase, even so. Okay, even so, I have, you know, I may have an allergy or something that holds me back, but even so, I can find ways to have fun and live a meaningful life, right? Language, that changes our perception of our life, ourselves, and others.
It's so great. And I'll say, talking about language and phrases, we, as I'm saying, our family read a book by David Goggins, and he talked about this phrase that the military use that is embracing the suck. Yeah. And our oldest son is now in the Army, and that was something that we would write to him, like, climb your mountain and embrace the suck. And he said that like pulled him through boot camp.
Oh.
And so is that, and I know like when you hear that phrase, you might not get like warm and fuzzy feeling, or you might not feel like that's an empowering phrase. Is that a phrase that have you heard of that? And like, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
So I haven't heard of that, but I can see the power in it. It's sort of along the lines of my husband's English. So the whole phrase, keep calm and carry on, and that was born out of wartime when things were sucking, right? And they had to embrace the suck and move forward, right? So really what that gets at is this concept of acceptance. And, again, acceptance is in that theory, acceptance and commitment therapy. And I always like to reframe what acceptance means, because I think that there's this connotation that acceptance means we have to like something, and we don't. We absolutely do not have to like it, right? Just like in that phrase, embrace the suck. You don't have to, enjoy that boot camp is sucky. It's hard. It's difficult, right? But you do have to embrace it. You do have to sit with it. So really that's what that is. That is it sounds like a phrase to help somebody say, this is where I'm at. This is the current state of things. I don't have to like it, but I do have to deal with it. And that's the same when we're dealing with, alpha-gal or food allergies or, atopic dermatitis that just feels so life debilitating. This is the reality of our life, and we can have all the feelings about it, and we can say it sucks, and we can be honest about it, but we have to say, this is the cards I've been dealt. Now what do we do with it? And now how do we change that into, I want to move forward in a meaningful way in alignment with my values. And honestly, we do have to change our language to do that. If we continue to talk about it in a negative way, that doesn't mean we can't, we can use the words like this sucks, but this sucks and what, right? There's a second part of that sentence.
That's so neat. And what's coming to mind for me is thinking about all these tools that I've read for parenting that I never really applied this theory to, but it's totally using them, right? Like I had a really good friend of mine who's a teacher, like an elementary school teacher. I remember our kids are very close in age, and at one point something bad happened and her son was very upset. And she said, if I had a magic wand, I would take this away from you. And now I'm thinking, and I was like, oh my gosh, that worked like you had a magic wand, right? But now while you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, this really is sort of leaning into it. It's naming it, or even just maybe not naming it, but maybe it's acceptance, right? Yeah. And then we're accepting this. So now we get to figure out what we're going to do with it, even though we can't take it away or whatever, By
the way, that magic wand question is actually a therapeutic tool that we learn in graduate school.
Oh, is it really?
There's all sorts, there's all sorts of versions of it. There's the, if I had a magic wand, if I had magic pills, the whole theory is like, basically we're asking, like, if you didn't have to deal with what you have to deal with right now, what would you be doing? And that helps us like realize, what is it you're not doing? What's getting, and now we can figure out what's getting in the way and get you there, right? So it really actually is a therapeutic question.
Yeah, where can we go from here? That's really neat. And look at me, parenting like a therapist. Not even knowing I was doing it.
I love it.
In that aspect, anyway, my gosh.
Hey, I'm a therapist and a mom, and trust me. And again, I'm a trained marriage and family therapist, and I used to get the question all the time, so your marriage is perfect, right? And I would go, no, because I'm human and I'm not a therapist in my marriage. So, we're not therapists as parents, we're parents doing the best we can.
That's right. That's right. And learning where we can, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So is there a good starting point? I feel like if you're kind of in the trenches of dealing with a new transition, a new diagnosis, something that seems very overwhelming, a lot of anxiety, is there like one place to focus to shift your language, like to focus on one piece of that? Does that make sense?
So I would honestly, and I know some people may feel like, well, this is kind of like not a big thing, but it really is sort of the starting point of approaching things differently. Again, for many, this is going to be a different approach. This is going to be a mindset shift. And that's not an easy thing to do sometimes, right? So the best place to start, and I know we covered it earlier, is really this place of noticing. noticing what you're feeling, noticing what you're thinking in any kind of situation. And what we call that is observing. You're observing yourself. You're observing the context. So observe what you're thinking, observe what you're feeling, observe what's happening around you. Again, I like to use a lot of metaphors in my work and just in my life in general. I think I'm always using a metaphor, something to do with with Friends, because it's my favorite show. So I'm usually somehow applying it to, when Joey does, whatever. So, but in any case, I promise I don't say to my clients, how you doing? I don't. No, I'm saying, how are you feeling? How you doing? Anyhow, but really observing. So I will use the metaphor, like pretend that you're sitting in a movie theater and all of a sudden on the screen comes on, a specific scene of an experience in your life and you're watching it. So you're no longer yourself in this, you're watching yourself as the main character of this scene in this movie. And you're going to observe, what do you notice that you're feeling? What do you notice that character is thinking? What do they do with that? What do the people around them do? Is their body tense? All of these parts. So learning how to observe. And again, that starts with changing our language. I notice I'm feeling. I'm aware that I'm thinking. And so if you can just start there, if you want to take it one step farther, I'll have clients of mine, especially if they're really stuck in a struggle with, say, anxiety and fear, we're going to name it. You can give it a fun name. You can give it a mean name. You can describe what kind of voice it has. How does it talk to you? Does it yell at you? Is it loud? Can you turn the volume down? Just start making this sort of like a separate entity where you don't judge yourself for having the thought or feeling, but all you're doing is observing how you respond to it and giving yourself that space to start thinking, I have choice on how I want to proceed going forward.
That is going to be so helpful to so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. I use this, I use this stuff for myself. Even as a therapist, when I'm feeling anxious, because as humans, we all have anxiety, we all experience fear. That's actually normal and healthy. Anxiety can actually be a useful tool and help us decide to be safe and prepare. It's when it comes in a very large package. Here's the perception piece of this, right? When we are highly anxious, we tend to overestimate risk and underestimate our ability to handle something or deal with something. So that's the perception piece with anxiety there, right? So if we can step back and just observe, like you said, Candace, like I'm observing that I'm physically not feeling well right now. Or, I've had clients who kind of get panicky when they drive, maybe because they've had a bad experience on a highway or something, right? And so, okay, I'm observing that, like, I'm nervous and this makes sense, right? Because I've had a bad experience. And so taking that further, if they need to do something to sort of help them shift their mindset onto something else, they can turn the radio on and start to really get engaged in the song that they're singing, or they can focus on their breath, right? So that they're not judging, they're not overthinking things and kind of spiraling downward, but they're aware and now they're trying to do something different. Yeah. We humans like to complicate things. Our mind is our overly helpful friend sometimes. It actually tries so hard to help that it actually makes it worse.
That's the truth, isn't it? Yeah, my husband and I, like, he teases me all the time, right? Because I'm the worrier in our family. But I'm like, you know what? I am so good at overthinking. Like, I'm like the best at it.
See, and even that's using language to like reframe it, right? You're not judging yourself. Now you're just like, I accept the fact that I'm a worrier and that I overthink, and I know this is something I have to work with, and I'm learning tools to maybe do it a little less or change how, but you're changing your perception of what that feels like.
Right. Maybe my next step will be to come up with a different word instead of overthinking.
Yeah.
Evaluating. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more question for you, and it's a question we ask all our guests, because Candace and I identify so thoroughly with music. Really, I think for both of us, it's been our whole lives, but more now than ever, because it's something that we can enjoy, that we don't have to worry about reacting to. And so I'm wondering if you could share with us if there is one song or even an album or a musician, we've had to expand this a little bit, that brings you joy. And it can either be, in this moment or for all time?
So I love this question because although I'm not a musician and I'm not really musically inclined, I love music. I am somebody who songs instantly, and I think for most of us, this is probably the case, they transport me back to a place in time or a feeling or an experience, right? So when I saw this question, I was like, oh my gosh, how will I answer it? So I've got a couple answers. One, anything from Billy Joel makes me feel good. And I don't know if that's because, my parents listened to him when I was growing up. He was my second concert. Huey Lewis and the News was my first.
That's fun.
If any people are listening, they're like, who are they? Never mind. Just, it's you're too young. No judgment there. That's fine. But so anything Billy Joel, and then anything that it was a song in a movie that I particularly loved. So like, I love watching Pretty Woman, and any song that comes up from there, like Peter Cetera has some songs, and I just instantly feel like calm and good, even if it's a sad movie, because it's putting me back in that experience. So I love music. I love things that transport us back to a different place and time and bring out nostalgia.
That's a fantastic answer. And nobody saw my reaction because it's on video and we're just releasing the audio. But when you said Pretty Woman, I was thinking, oh, just like that Roxette song in Pretty Woman. And then you said it and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. Well, think about, okay, here we go. We're going to go back to Friends. Think about that song, the theme song for Friends. I mean, like, we all instantly are like, oh my gosh. And then, that episode and that episode and that, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, it's kind of like a form of language. Obviously there are words in songs and then the melodies and stuff with it. It's such a powerful tool.
It is. And, it makes me think, because I love music. I'm terrible at math.
Me too.
Why did we not learn math through song? I would have remembered every lyric to knowing how to do a math problem. Like I can remember, it's ridiculous. So it's like, what does that say about how we store music,
Well, when you're driving down the road and you have the 90s station on, like I typically do, and all of a sudden you're like automatically singing, and I'm like, I didn't know I knew the words to that, right? I think you're totally right. My dad majored in math, and I did not get that part of him. I'm awful. And I agree with you, Candace. If we had learned it in song, I probably would have been better at math.
Yeah. My sister taught me the preamble to the Constitution. What was that show? It was on like PBS or something, but there was a song of it when I was like 4, and here I was the one I'm talking about.
Bill of Rights?
Yes.
What was that?
Rainbow?
What?
Reading Rainbow?
No, it wasn't Reading Rainbow. It was
Magic School Bus?
No, earlier than that.
But again, a song brings you to a visit, right? And
right. And so I was thinking of this because I was a 5-year-old who knew the preamble to the Constitution, right?
Because of the song.
Yeah.
That's all about perception and language. I'm telling you, language is an amazing tool. And we don't even realize that we're using that tool all day, every day.
Yeah, it's so cool. Well, we have so enjoyed this conversation, Tamara, and we hope we get the opportunity to talk to you again.
Thank you so much. I enjoy talking about this topic. And again, it's not talked about often enough.
No. Debbie, did you need to say something?
It was Schoolhouse Rock.
That's it. Okay. We couldn't end without actually figuring out what that was. Because someone's listening and they're yelling. They knew that, and they've been saying it for the last couple minutes because they knew the title of
That's exactly right. That's why I had to get it out there for all of you listening. Well, Tamara, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. And we can't wait till the next time we talk to you.
You're so welcome. Thank you, ladies, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today on In the Tall Grass. Visit us at 2alphagals.com. That's TWOalphagals.com. Or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at 2alphagals. If you enjoyed listening, please leave a review and help us grow this community.
We're all faced with obstacles on our journey, whether it be food allergies or tick-borne diseases. You might outgrow the reactions, but you won't outgrow the person you become. Ticks suck, but life doesn't have to.